Hi, I'm Linda Fox. I'm senior reporter with PhocusWire, and I'm here with Aaron Gowell from SilverRail, CEO and co-founder, if I'm not wrong, and also with Johannes Thunert from Distribution. Yes? And you are co-founder and chief business officer.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so welcome both of you.
Thanks.
So a year ago, it feels like there was enormous funding in ground transport. And I know that's a big area, and we'll get into some of the different areas in a minute, but it feels like, you could say scooter and somebody would throw, 100 million at it. Right. So Aaron, start us off. Why all of the hype and what has happened?
Well, I think there was a lot of hype because there was just a lot of capital running around. And there were a lot of cool new business models and this whole mass thing, all the fragmentation on the ground, all the scooter stuff, all the bike stuff. Uber invested and then divested. You saw people get in, get out. And I think they have had a hard time figuring out what's an actual business model that will work. Things that have worked are people that do stuff around bus and other major pieces of ground transit or rail. That's good heavy duty stuff. But I think the smaller things are still trying to figure itself out. But there's a lot of capital that came in and chased it initially. And it remains to be seen if they actually are good businesses or not.
Yeah. And it does seem like a bit of a mess right now. You seeing bikes everywhere, seeing scooters dumped everywhere. So now, is it fair to say that the focus has gone back to B2B in terms of the investment?
I'll let you take a crack at that one first.
From the outside, it looks a bit like it, right? Because I think also investors on the B2C side, you really see way a bigger investment round, right? Because you need all the money for end consumer acquisition and so on. While on the B2B side, you can go in a bit lower, right? It's a bit more, and it also suggests a bit more security, right? It's a bit more plannable, right? So I think, it's safe to say you see a bit more investment right now in the B2B.
Yeah, the last big consumer round we probably saw was Omeo, with something like 80 million and whatever, that was 6 months ago or something.
Book away.
Did they do a good round?
I think they 20. That's not huge, but it's.
What's interesting is, I believe, I don't know this for fact, but part of Omeo's pitch was getting into the B2B side of the business, which is the deal they just did with Uber, as an example. So I do think this kind of B2B model is something that some of these consumer products are now looking at and saying, is that another path here or a parallel path to their core consumer business?
And you did get 30 million euro in the summer, which is, great. But was it harder getting that than, traditionally, did you think? And did they want more? When it comes to the term sheet, was it harder? I think
when we raised the round, it obviously was a bit of a different environment than it is today, right? We came out of COVID pretty strong. So we have basically diversified our business during COVID times, grew times 10 straight after COVID compared to pre-COVID. So we had good numbers to show very solid business. And I think this really helped in the course of the funding round. So it wasn't really that much harder than previous times. I think it really comes down to the business model and the numbers that you can show for.
There's I was just listening to the pundits on stage just now, and they were saying that there's now something like I think it was something like 150 cities left without an airport, or something like that. Something that's come out of the pandemic where they no longer have access to an airport. I can't remember what the exact figure was, but that must represent a huge opportunity for buses. We've talked about last mile before. So what's in the way?
I don't know about what's in the way, but you're definitely right that there's a trend there. I think there's two trends. One is less lift coming into some of these cities. The other one is the green thing. I mean, in France, they're shutting down 4 domestic flight routes, right?
It has to be 2 hours.
Yeah, so if you're Paris to Lyon as an example, and they're shutting down the short haul flight, they're going to push you onto some other form of transportation, probably the train, maybe the bus. But that's a real thing that's happening. That the whole sustainability angle is definitely a wave that the ground transport's seeing. I mean, we're seeing that, if you look at Google, a year ago, their CEO said, we want to help 1 billion people travel greener in 2022. That translated into the Google team saying sustainability is now at the very top of the strategy. That's the guiding light. That turned into a deal we just did with Google for us to power their air platform with rail as well and the main search, which is the first time they've integrated rail into the main search paths. But that's a real thing that's happening because they are seeing these trends of, people shutting down these short haul flights and wanting to, in fact, help that out.
Yeah, and similarly, you must be seeing, momentum for in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, we see if, like you said, all the big also OTAs going for a sustainability angle, right? When you promote sustainable travel. And I think obviously ground transportation is on the very forefront. It has the lowest carbon footprint, all of them. And the customers demand it, right? They want these eco-friendly options. And this is where like bus, rail, or public transport comes in.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting also to see like Uber getting into this. You know,
Yeah.
Dara's a really smart guy thinking about, we've got all these people that are using our platform. What else should we be doing? And I think he really is going after that super app idea of what's the one platform that can plan and book across multiple modes. And I think it's a real opportunity, you know, whether it's them or somebody else.
And presumably a big part of that is the monetization side, because I believe that, you know, the car on demand, whatever, is not profitable yet.
Right.
So therefore, if you build, you know, other bits and pieces, I was going to say ecosystem, but it's so overused right now. Then you can
as Dara described it, he's like, look, I have a big grocery store. I have a lot of shelves. I have too many people walking into the grocery store. I need more stuff on the shelves. That's how he's thinking about it.
But do you see it as a threat then? You know, what kind of
Is it a threat? I mean, it can be, if you're competing directly. If I was Trainline, as an example, in the UK, and I was a pure consumer play up against Uber, I would be very worried about that, because that's Uber and Omio working together.
Right.
That's a pretty powerful duo. So
you
that's
don't worry about
interesting.
being cut out by some, you know, all of the partnerships there.
I, to be very honest, I think it's great for the industry. When you take a look at how many of the bookings are still offline, I think the biggest opportunity for all of us is to educate customers to book online, pre-book online, right? And I think no matter if it's the big OTAs, if it's the big mobility platforms, or if it's Google, we all need to educate the customer to do that. And then, the market is way big for all of us.
But I do think, to an earlier point though, I think the SaaS models are going to have a good couple of years here. I mean, I think consumer models have a good time when capital's cheap and they can raise a ton and they don't care how they spend it. They can be drunken sailors, but when you get to times like this, where you're going to, I think, at least a 3-year hard run, a SaaS model that doesn't have high customer acquisition costs, if you can get over what I call feeding the beast, which is your big expensive, team. Once you can pay the engineers, like, you can actually have a really profitable business. I mean, ours is the most profitable it's ever been in its whole history. But that's also SaaS, right? They always say SaaS takes forever, and then it just sort of, catches, catches wind at a certain point. We're kind of in that phase.
Do you think what Uber's doing, I mean, obviously it's exciting, lots of people are talking about it. Does it help push the industry forward? Does it make people, give them the impetus to say, well, hang on a sec, if we don't grasp some of these issues?
I think it certainly does, right? When you imagine yourself, you're being at the airport, arrive late, pop out your app, right? And you maybe for the very first time, you're confronted with an eco-friendly train, right? I think it also shows, it gets new customers involved into that, right? Somebody who might not have thought about this before and might be converted then to a public transportation user. So I think it overall helps the industry quite a lot.
Right. If they were doing true comparisons of the modes, then that would get interesting. They're not quite there yet. At the moment, it's just an add-on. But I also think it's a little bit limited for them, in the sense that I don't think people start their planning process through a car app.
Right.
I think you start through a map.
Yeah.
So I think anybody who's in the maps game has a real opportunity to kind of really transform how people are moving around. It's the map side.
And a lot of people are saying that, and Google has obviously been doing a lot of development work on maps. Right. Why hasn't that, therefore, do you think, come to the fore sooner? Why aren't we starting our journeys booking on maps?
I think we're actually doing it, right? We are providing quite a lot of data feeds to Google ourselves. And we see there quite a lot of demand coming from, right? So we see the users very, very often starting their search on Google, right? Where they check out, where they purchase. This might be a different topic, right now. But at least the initial user demand definitely comes from the maps providers.
Yeah. Okay. I think Omio really did the first real job of trying to do map-based travel. I don't think it's perfect, because I don't know that people plan long trips off of a map, meaning you tend to go book your hotel first, and then you book your flight separately, and then you might do the train and the bus or whatever happens next. Doing all of that in kind of one, which is how they presented it initially, I don't know that really worked, but I really admire what they're trying to do. I think the people who do well are the people who are doing much more regional oriented stuff, because I think the real multimodal stuff changing behavior, getting out of cars onto public transport, is about door to door within a region. I live here, I want to go see my grandmother, it's a 2.5 hour trip. And I think that's the real opportunity, is that more door to door oriented stuff, as opposed to the global map.
Is it still the biggest challenge? Because when we've spoken in the past, that, last mile stuff has been, it's fragmented,
Right.
it's, there's a lack of technology. Then there's the national providers. Well, when it comes to rail,
Right.
they don't share the data. I mean, are these common issues to rail and bus? Is it the same challenges?
No, absolutely, right. We also work with a lot of public transport operators to solve this last mile problem. But I can very much agree to this. It mostly comes down to technology, right? So it's a very fragmented market, also in terms of tech, right? There's also the willingness and the occasion on the public transport side, right? They very much feel like it's their customer. They want to own the full journey, not give away data away.
It's like a travel-wide problem, isn't it?
Exactly, right? They don't want to give the data away, want to keep it. I think that's more the two challenges that we see working with them.
Has much changed, Aaron, in the last couple of years since, do you see it changing?
In the rail side?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, we do see the rail carriers acting more like OTAs in a way, right? Because they're starting to wake up to the fact that, they have a customer and they want to add other stuff around it.
Yeah, and link to airports. And
right,
that's
exactly.
All that clever stuff.
So, SNCF has a project right now where they're trying to think about how do they add in all the neighboring country rail into their customer base, so that their customers can say, I want to go to Italy from France, and how do they do that, right? So they are thinking about this stuff. We power transport for Wales, so the Welsh rail system. They want to add in our door-to-door journey planning capability, because they want people who take their trains to actually plan door-to-door and be able to think about the other modes of transport that go with that. So I think that's really quite interesting when we see those guys. Great British Rail, which is this idea of consolidating all of the British rail systems into a single platform. If you looked at the spec of what they're looking for, it has a lot more than just booking a rail ticket. It is CO2 data, it's door-to-door journey planning. They really kind of want to cover the full gamut of what those people need when they're traveling.
I mean, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but they have tried that before, haven't they? And there's been all sorts of ticketing issues, and then the train operating companies and...
The UK is definitely its own weird little animal because of the fragmentation.
In so many ways.
In so many ways. In part because of that deregulation, and they've got those, 22 train operating companies. And that's frankly been a bit of a mess, which is why now they're trying to okay, let's push this all back together and see if we can't fix this. We'll see.
So trends coming down the road in ground transportation. I know that's a big one, but just give me, top of your head.
From my perspective, definitely a seamless booking experience, right? As you already said, you can already see certain information on Google, right? Or certain super apps, right? But also making it a seamless experience to be able, with a one-click buy, to purchase the ticket, get the ticket right on your phone, enter the train, enter the bus, whatever you choose, right? I think this is really a big trend right now, right? To integrate this fully into the customer experience and make it seamless.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think there are kind of two macro trends. One is, I think the green thing's really going to be a driver. Now, a lot of people, talk about that and go, yeah, but it's not really, the consumers aren't changing their behavior. Well, it's actually not the consumer you need to have change behavior. You need Google to change its behavior. Yeah. And when Google does something, then every OTA is like a lemming, and then they run right after doing everything that Google just did, right? So if they start pushing something, you're going to see this end up in Booking.com, in Expedia. It'll push. I think that's one of the key trends. I think the other one, to Johannes's point, is it is around what I'd call multimodal ground transport booking and planning, and getting that to be seamless mobility essentially. And I think that is a real thing. We ran some tests not that long ago. It's just rail, but you could see how it could work across a bunch of systems, where we did account-based ticketing. So you had an account on your phone, you had an app, and you walk through a Bluetooth reader at the rail station. And because of location-based, you know what train you got on, and you know what station you got off. And so all you had to do is look at that and say, that's where they got on, that's where they got off. What was the best price for that moment in time?
Like your Oyster card in London.
And then just whack the ticket, whack the account.
Yeah.
That's the right way to do it. And so you could see doing that, and that translating onto the bus and whatever the other modes are, and literally just following the person around and saying, okay, well, it should have been this ticket for all of that activity.
It shouldn't be that hard, should it?
No, it shouldn't be that hard. No,
Okay.
And it will get easier.
Okay. So just finally, we're going to call you a Titan, and we're going to call you a Trailblazer, because this is Titans and Trailblazers.
I finally made it. The Titan.
Except we don't have you on stage anymore.
But very small Titan.
Yeah. The graphics. Anyway, so what can you learn from, a company like Johannes, and similarly, what can you learn, and perhaps not make mistakes, not saying that you've made mistakes, but, there must be things that you can learn from each other.
Yeah, I think one of the more interesting things with younger companies is how they've thought through product and the technology side. I still come from that world that's a bit more waterfall oriented, big systems, big platforms. They're not as easy and flexible, they're a bit monolithic. And I look at the new companies and I'm like, oh my God, I wish we had a platform that was that dynamic. Yeah. So there's a lot to be learned on product and architecture from these guys.
Do you feel like getting what you've got and chucking it out and starting again?
Sometimes I do, yeah, because it's a big monster and you're like, okay, well, I want to make this change. They're like, okay, we'll have that to you in 2 months. Like, oh, great. Thanks a lot.
Johannes, similarly.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Avoid some mistakes.
100%. Or there's a lot of things to learn, right, every day. So basically, right now we're at a stage where we come from a global or like regional perspective, building to a true global player right now. So we are active basically now across 70 countries already, but want to scale this massively in the next years. And I think that it's great to see some examples how other companies have already done it, what kinds of issues have run into, what kinds of were the bottlenecks in terms of scaling the teams and so on. This is something always great to have examples to learn from.
Great.
I just want to say one last thing, which is because you started with capital. I think it's going to be a really hard run for companies for the next 2 years.
Yeah, agreed.
I was talking to one of the guys at TCV, Woody Marshall, and Woody said, and I said to Woody, I said, you've got so much capital. How are you thinking about this? He goes, you know what we're like, Aaron? He goes, we're like Tyrannosaurus Rex. We're big and mean, but we got very small hands. We're not going to hand out much cash. And so I was like, okay. I get it. The bar is very high.
But we've spoken about capital quite a lot in the past. Is there not there must be an impetus on them to use up the capital?
They need to deploy it, but I think they're just going to be really careful where they put it. Yeah. And I'll bet that the bets get even bigger, because I think if they find a company that they really like, they're going to say, I'm not going to give these guys 20 million. I'm going to give these guys 50, and I'm going to push this for longer. I think those will be the kind of bets they make.
There you go, Johannes. There's your next series right there for you. Do you want to tell us anything now?
No, I think we are quite well equipped for the future.
A few weeks, maybe.
Yeah.
Johannes, Aaron, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks.